We won't be discussing street art versus graffiti, what's good art, what's bad art. Some of you might like murals, some people don't like murals. But mural arts, we do engage a community process. And I think Dot Master, who spoke yesterday about the New Arts Festival in Norway, really kind of hit on what we do in Philadelphia, which is engage the community in the art, which means we don't hire artists to just go put up artwork. They have to work with the community, and the community has input into design or approval of design, because they have to look at it every day. So we do have a community process, and we use it extensively in all of our programs, which are numerous. I have tons of slides. I'm going to go through them really quick, because mural arts has grown into a huge program. It started out 30 years ago in 1984 in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, it was talked about a lot yesterday, as there was this thing going between New York and Philly, which is always happening. But basically, we had a huge graffiti problem in Philadelphia, and a lot of it arose out of the gang wars that were happening at the time in Philadelphia. There were a lot of street gangs, which means like this street was against that street. Kids were tagging their areas. They had gang signs. And I read last night about Cornbread, who was mentioned as one of the first graffiti artists in Philadelphia. And he actually learned how to do that tagging while he was in a placement as a juvenile delinquent in our youth development centers in Pennsylvania, where he saw written on the walls the tags of the gangs. And he wasn't in a gang. And somebody at the place called him Cornbread, because he always was asking for cornbread. And they had white bread. He didn't like white bread, he wanted cornbread. So he came up with his nickname, Cornbread, and he started writing it everywhere. So he actually learned in juvenile facility the tagging. And so we had this huge problem and with graffiti everywhere. And so that was our mayor at the time, Wilson Good, who was the first black mayor of Philadelphia. And he decided he was going to fight graffiti. This isn't 30 years ago, so so he called together the kids that were writing graffiti, and there's some of them there, and they look very happy to be there. And he said they had to take a pledge not to write graffiti, and that he would give them jobs over the summer. So it was kind of carrot and stick. If you write graffiti, you're going to get in trouble, but if you stop and you take the pledge, we'll give you a job. So the kids, they ended up getting over 1,000 kids to take this anti-graffiti pledge. And out of that became the Mural Arts Program. So Jane Golden, working with a couple of other people, started this small 6-week summer program where the kids that were doing graffiti would have to white it out. Or you guys call it buffing, when you paint out graffiti. I've never heard that word before, but anyway, they were painting out the graffiti. So Jane came up with this idea, let's do pictures or murals where the graffiti was and engage the kids that were writing the graffiti, because then they wouldn't get tagged. So this is one of our really early murals, and it's kind of an homage to the immigration of blacks from the south up to the north, from the rural roots to the city. Then we started working with artists, kind of famous artists from Philadelphia. This is Sidney Goodman, who was an illustrator, and he worked with the kids, and he kind of did the face. So the artists generally do the intricate work, and then the kids, one of the kids decided they wanted some poetry. So that's a Walt Whitman quote, "I am large, I contain multitudes." Walt Whitman was a poet from Camden, New Jersey, which is across the river from Philadelphia. This is one of our early murals. I don't know if you guys know who Dr. J is. He's a famous basketball player, and he was on the Sixers, which is our basketball team. And this artist is Kent Twitchell from California. He came out and did Dr. J, and he wanted him to be portrayed in a suit because, you know, it's out of the box of, you know, he's not just a basketball player. He's a very intelligent man, and he's a local hero. And this was our first mural that was done on a cloth. The other murals were painted directly on the wall, and we discovered this method of painting on this. It's like fabric interlining, and so you can paint it in a prison, you can paint it in a school, and you put it up on the wall like wallpaper. So, and the artist can work in the studio over the winter time. And this one's been redone because it's a very iconic mural in Philadelphia. So in '96, we became part city agency. So part of our agency is part of the city of Philadelphia, and part's a nonprofit. So that enables us to raise funding through foundations, but we also are supported by the city. We've gotten federal grants and some state grants. So it's a hybrid organization. So we started moving on to more murals. Philadelphia has over 3,000 murals. This is just kind of a smattering of our murals. This is on one of the busiest streets in Philadelphia. It's called Sliding Home. It's Jackie Robinson, who was the first black baseball player. And the artist decided to put it in black and white for obvious reasons. But the woman that lived in the house wanted Jackie Robinson, and that's what we did. This is a mural we did in an area that had a lot of racial tension back in the 90s, and we got the neighbors together. This was a difficult process where the white neighbors, the black neighbors, they didn't want to talk. It's a very closed area. People have lived here a long time. But they all came together and did this, we call it the Peace Garden, and we did a mosaic piece there. So we do a lot of healing of communities through our work. This is another iconic mural on a very busy intersection. It's 8 stories high. It's the tallest mural in Philadelphia. And it is one we did with our art education program, and sort of stories past and present and future. It's huge. So what do we do? What's our, these are our concepts. That we create art with others. We transform places, individuals, and communities and institutions. And that's sort of what we're talking about today, the call to action. How do you work with all these different agencies? We empower artists to be change agents, stimulate dialogue about critical issues, and build bridges of connection and understanding. And it's in service of a larger movement. We value equity, fairness, and progress. And we listen to our program and our participants, community, whoever we're working with, we listen. And it's not an easy process. Some of these projects are not easy. We have a branch called Community Murals that just works with different communities. I'll go through these pretty fast. This is in Chinatown. It's a gateway to Chinatown. And it sort of goes through their culture of coming over here and past, present, and future. This is Anna Uribe. She's a Colombian artist. This is in a Hispanic area of Philadelphia. People like waterfalls. People like landscapes. And there's one actually on the other side of the street that mirrors it. And then this performance space was put in as part of the project with our Horticultural Society. So it's really transforming public spaces. This one's holding grandmother's quilt. This was a neighborhood lady that did quilts. And so she's making a quilt, and then this whole garden area was transformed. This was like a drug area, this lot here. And on the other side was another mural where their kids are holding the other end of the quilt, which that building was knocked down. But this was another transformation of space. This is a before. This is a side of I guess you call them pubs, bar, restaurant in Fairmount. This is interesting because it's a new technique. It's charcoal, and it's covered with a glaze. So we're always interested in new techniques that artists want to try. And this is actually a reflection of a park that's nearby. This is another example of a garden with a mural that kind of blends in with the scene there. This is a side of an art school. It's called Autumn. This original mural was built over, and we wanted to replicate it with some changes. So the art school wanted a mural, so we put this mural on the side of the art school. This is the side of an Italian restaurant downtown. That's before, that's after. And most of the people eating there are staff at Mural Arts. The artists put in the staff. This is a train trestle in an area. This is like 2 blocks from where I live. So that's before. It's called Mount Airy. It's after. So just kind of improving the neighborhood, making it look nicer. This is along the Schuylkill River. This was a prime graffiti area under the bridge. And we put a rowing mural in there. This was kind of controversial. A lot of people didn't want a mural there. It's a historic area. It's an historic bridge, even though it's not that well taken care of. And it was controversial. This is Shepard Fairey. I think we all know who he is. He came to Philly and did this mural on the side of a building in an area called Fishtown. This is just this year he did this. He did it in a week, which is pretty fast. This is a mural we just did this year. This is a guy, Dr. White, who died at a young age but was really into health of young black men. And we did a whole series of health workshops in barbershops around the area. And he was a friend of one of the guys in the Roots, Tyreek, Black Thought. So they came to us and wanted to do a mural in honor of him, and this is what we came up with. It's sort of his story. Oh, this is a new one too. This is a side of a brewery. That's before. This sort of shows the process during. This is painted right on the wall, kind of in the middle. And there it is done. So this is you could say it's commercial because it's advertising the beer, but it's much nicer than what was there. We have a huge art education program that involves over 1,000 kids a year, free art ed. And in the United States, I don't know about England, most of the art programs for kids have been cut for budget funding, arts, music. So a lot of kids don't get art education. So we provide free art programming for kids after school and during school, and in juvenile facilities, kids that are detained in our, well, I call it the juvenile prison, but it's not. It's a youth detention center, and some other programming for kids that are involved with the courts. These are recycle trucks. So we decided they were kind of ugly, so we worked with kids and did that to them. So the kids created the color and the pattern. They learned about color and pattern, and these are shrink wrapped. And they learned about recycling. There they are. This is right around City Hall, lined up. They did a whole parade of them. So they're still around Philadelphia. You go around, you see these recycle trucks everywhere. We did lunch trucks. Those little, you have those here too, food trucks. And then we did these big bellies. These are recycling containers on the street. And they're all different designs. The kids came up with these designs, and we wrapped them. This is Miss Rockaway Armada, which is connected with Swoon, the street artist. They came to town and worked with our art ed kids, and these are things that you would want to, things you can use and transform into other things. And this is right downtown at a parking lot. And this is all kids' work. This is another mural art ed did with Sonia Sanchez, who's a famous poet and from Philadelphia. And it was pieces of haiku songs. So we did all this haiku poetry. And on the mural, there's Maya Angelou, Sonia Sanchez, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker. They all sent in haikus for this peace mural. And this was an interesting mural because it was two artists. And originally those kids on the side, which I'm not really a fan of, you know, they kind of look plopped in there. That came out of the community. They wanted to see the local kids in the mural. So the artist had to kind of compromise the design and kind of put them in. So sometimes you have the artist, it's really hard for the artist because it's not like totally their concept. This is Ursula Rucker, who's a poet from Philadelphia that works a lot with us. A lot of times we'll do poetry with our projects. So we did a mural for Ursula. And art ed kids did a lot of poetry writing with her. This is another project we did with an artist named Chris Stain. These are kids involved on in-home detention, which means they're in trouble, and they're highly supervised. So it's all like how they see themselves. It's a real long mural. This is just a piece of it. So they got to portray themselves on how they want to be seen. It's kind of interesting, the different poses. This is a school, charter school downtown, and this is called Mapping Free Area, and how kids get to school, because they come from all over the city to get to the school. So this is the city and where all the kids live, and it's a huge mural. It used to be a mural about truancy, but it got, sometimes we'll paint over murals that get old and kind of dated and put new murals up. This is a project we did on homelessness among youth called A Place to Call Home. Sort of took over a block, painted the houses, and inside were mapping and resource centers for kids that needed a place to live. This is a continuation of that project, Journey to Home. Oh, this is the Roots mural. We worked with the Roots, who are from Philadelphia. Went to school there. So this is the wall before, during, and after. So there they are. This is a school we did. This was just a brick school. We worked with the math and science teacher. It's from atoms to the world, so it's really interesting. That's the inside of the school. We also have a huge program with behavioral health called the Porchlight Initiative. People with mental disorders or substance abuse. This was a project we did about homelessness downtown. This was about healing through spirituality on the side of that building there. This is a methadone clinic that used to be a Stetson hat factory. It's funny how the hat factory has become a methadone clinic. I think Jeff talked a little bit about that yesterday. But here's the mural after, working with the people that are inside the program. This was painted in the basement with the clients at the program, and Ursula Rucker did the poetry along the parking area. But it's all about a journey of addiction. This is a project for people that are voiceless, people that are homeless, and the color codes translate into the wording on the side. This is for vets. We worked a lot with vets with post-traumatic stress. So we did a couple of murals on a lot outlining their journey. This is another charcoal and glaze mural. So that's before and after. This is working with migrants from Bhutan and Nepal. We have a big population of people that have migrated from that part of the world to Philadelphia, in South Philadelphia. So we worked with them in their traditional patterns and opened up a storefront where they can come for resources, teach weaving to the kids. They have this great tradition of weaving. And so this is the resource center. We have art classes, English as a second language class. Oh, this is a huge project for, there's an addictions substance abuse center down the street from here. This is on a huge corner at Broad and Lehigh in Philadelphia. This is the building before, and that's it after. Rise. And in there are portraits of people, how you can't really see because it's so high up, and how they wanted to be portrayed. We had to do this with a swing stage from the top of the building down. That's it at night, looking towards Center City. And on the other side, we have Shine, which is really cool. This is really tall. You can see it from miles away. And the guys I work with actually build scaffolding, so they built the scaffold for this. So this is the program I run, which is Restorative Justice, which I'm very familiar with. I wanted to give you some stats. I had some on crime. Most of you know the United States has more people incarcerated than any other country in the world. We have 2.3 million people in prison, and it costs our country $60 billion a year to incarcerate people. And then one of the projects I did recently was how this affects children. We have 3 million children with a parent in jail, which causes, obviously, a whole slew of problems for the kids. The leading cause of incarceration of black males is nonviolent drug offenses, which people don't realize. African Americans are 12 to 13% of the population in the U.S. and 40% of those in jail. 6 times the rates for whites. 1 in every 32 Americans are involved with the criminal justice system in some way, whether under court supervision, incarcerated. 1 in 32. So it's a huge problem. And A lot of it comes out of our zero tolerance policies. We talked about zero tolerance for graffiti, but we have zero tolerance for everything. Zero tolerance for getting in trouble in school, you get kicked out. Just a whole slew of zero tolerance. So we have these big nets that are casting and collecting more people into our system. We have harsher sentences. We have 3 strikes and you're out. Pennsylvania, life is life. There's no parole. Once you got a life sentence, you'll never get any out. We have juveniles that are sentenced to life sentences. We have 500 juveniles in Pennsylvania that were sentenced to life sentences when they were under the age of 18. Some of them are in our program inside the prison. The Supreme Court just ruled that illegal, but it doesn't go back. It only goes forward. So a lot of those guys are trying to fight their sentences. And here, I think, is the video.
You know, when you're forced into conditions like prison, you have to kind of overcome and just adapt to what you have to do. So there's something that happens on an emotional level that you just disconnect yourself from your actual feelings because they become a real liability to you mentally. Rather than like try and go out and make friends and really like make sure that I had safety and joined a gang or anything like that, I stayed to myself and I just started doing artwork in the cell. And that was my way to kind of distance myself from all of these people. But what actually happened in doing the artwork was that people began to stop by and talk to me about what I was doing, and it allowed me to kind of see them just as normal people, because that's what's created in that system. It's designed to create division. That's how, you know, I made it through prison without letting that fear kind of force me into a gang or force me into basically being a criminal and fitting the labels that the institution tries to get you to conform to. You lose yourself in the process, and it's just a way to mentally escape prison. So these sheets, for me, represent the actual skin of the prison. So this is a process of confining the image within the skin of the prison, within the fabric of the prison itself. So it's a kind of way to bring the events that happen outside inside. The piece Apocalyptine 1638-9067 took me 5 years to conceptualize. I'd have to send it out in Unicorn boxes as soon as I was done creating them so that the police wouldn't confiscate them. I kind of just tried to keep a running dialogue in my head and tried to keep each piece kind of very systematic so that it would somehow fit together when I came home. And seeing the whole piece together was a way to know that I made it through okay and that I was able to turn this really negative experience into something positive. You know, making the piece itself was a way for me to kind of fight back against the institution. It was a way to use the materials of the institution against itself and use that as a medium to speak on my behalf because I didn't have a voice. So now that I actually have a voice, it's really empowering. It makes you feel like, it makes me feel like I won. Yeah, this is Crimes. I'm leaving work to head to the house.
What's the last name again, sir?
Crimes, K-R-I-M-E-S.
I got you, man.
All right, thanks.
All right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I met Jesse at federal prison when he was still in prison. 10 minutes? Okay. So, yeah, he's interesting. He works for us now. Was able to get him a job, and that piece is going to be exhibited in Paris in the spring at Palace, the Tokyo Palace. So it's really an amazing story. So we've done other projects. We brought crime victims and inmates together, and they created 2 murals. It was a long process of hearing each other out inside the prison. And this is the victim's journey. And this is a project we did with kids I worked with in a juvenile facility and inmates. I would bring the boys to the prison. And I didn't really want to go because I'm like, I don't want to sit in the prison with a bunch of murderers, and I don't want the kids to be there. And I ended up going and just seeing how it went, and ended up going for 3 years. And becoming friends with the inmates, and you start seeing how, okay, they've done something horrible, but that doesn't define the whole person. So it was an amazing process for me personally, and then I found out the power of art working with the kids and the inmates, and I really got hooked on this art and how it brings people together. And this is like 300 feet long. It's this journey of what kids need to stay out of trouble. This is one of the first mural projects I did. This is the side of a church, and it's about people entering society back from prison. And it's based on a Raphael painting you probably recognize. This is one we did downtown in Old City where the art galleries are, which people were like, oh, I don't think you guys are going to be able to work downtown where the art galleries are, and we did. This is the side of an art in wood center where they have pieces made with wood. And we did this beautiful mural on the side of the building. And this is the dedication. We always have these ceremonies at the end. This is a mural in honor of Henry Tanner, the famous painter who was from Philadelphia, who moved to Paris because of discrimination in the US. And we worked with kids. And within this mural are words that you can't really see, that the kids learned his story and how it inspired them. This is a park we did in South Philly. Julian Abel was an African-American architect, first graduate of University of Pennsylvania School of Architecture. And this whole park has been redone, and it's beautiful. This is other things we do are landscaping. This is a rec center. We've done a number of rec centers in neighborhoods. The guys made these benches. They handmade the tiles. There was nowhere for the kids to sit, so we had meetings. We wanted somewhere to sit. We redid the building there. We did the garden. There was a fence around there. We tore it down. Here's what we did in an urban garden. This is a whole mural we did. This was painted right on the wall. This is about the impact of incarceration on families. This was a long process. We had a conference. We had seminars throughout the city. And this has Q codes in it, so if you have a smartphone, you can put your phone up there and hear stories of people talking about what it's like to visit in jail and visit your family in jail. This is our last project that we did. It's the side of a music venue. It's huge. It's called Union Transfer. These are some other niches. This is the side of a school. They studied about water and the environment. This is an old school in Philadelphia, and we just did this huge wave on the side. So the guys I work with built this kind of outdoor classroom out of recycled materials. This is another school project we did. We do restorations of old signs. This is a Keith Haring mural that Keith Haring did, and we restored it twice so far. We just restored it. This is another mural, Richard Haas, that we restored downtown. This is Steve Powers, Espo, love letters, based on Cornbread's letters that he tagged all over Philly to his girlfriend, supposedly. This is along the rail line, the above-ground L train. So you ride the train and you see all these love letters. There's 35 of them. It's just gorgeous. And they kind of sneak up on you. This is another project we did. We're getting off the wall. This is light drift in the river. It had interactive. This is a huge project. This is the parking garage at the airport, before and after. How Philly moves. It's all people dancing. And we worked with a photographer. Now we've kind of gotten into a little bit of, I guess, street art. This is downtown in an area that's kind of revived with restaurants and things. And this is a project we did with Art Ed. Kind of little murals tucked in behind buildings. This is Howe and Nosum. And sculpture, this is at the Navy Yard. This is how we fish. This is about working. A lot of this was painted in the prison on parachute cloth. This is a huge project we did along a commercial corridor that's kind of fallen on hard times. We worked with Haas and Hahn, who are Dutch artists. That's before and that's after. And it goes along for about half a mile. Worked with the shop owners and picked out colors. This is called Psycholuster. This is along the train line. This is with Katerina Gross. I think Ben Ein was talking about looking out the train window and seeing bursts of color. Well, these are bursts of color. I ride this train to work, and I don't know how I feel about it, but it's interesting. These big color bursts. The graffiti artist kind of stayed away from it, but now it's covered. It's meant to be temporary. You can see the graffiti below it. These are some projects that we're doing. We're doing time exchanges where we're giving artists studio space in neighborhoods if they do a community project. Open Source is our street art festival that's coming up next October, and I'm hopefully working with Swoon, Shepard Ferry, and a sculptor from California named Sam Durant, who are going to work with the people in my programs to kind of talk about social justice issues and mass incarceration. I'm not sure what this project is. It's a curated bringing artists into Philadelphia to do cultural interventions in neighborhoods. It's a new initiative we have. This is sort of a wrap-up. We work with a lot of artists, a lot of public art, a lot of tours. We do tours. And this is our motto, Art Ignites Change.
Robyn, can you go back to that slide for a second?
Yeah, we employ a lot of artists. We have a lot of art schools in Philadelphia too, and it's a lot of interest among artists in working with the population that I work with. I have one more video. Sort of talks about the Guild program, our work program for people on probation and coming out of prison and what it does.
This is a poem I wrote about art and life. They say art is life. Well, lately I've been feeling like I already died, so I need to get into contact with it so I can feel like I've been revived. My life is like a picture so amazing that you wouldn't even believe what you see when you look at me. Words can't even explain such a feeling that I have, because when I look into this picture, I see a future and a past. Art is life.
So my name is Benjamin Volta, and I've worked with the City of Philadelphia Mural Arts Program, Restorative Justice Guild, for the last 2 years. This project came through a partnership with the Union Transfer Music Venue, where we explored the building, explored the site, thought about how to visualize in some way music and sound. We were fascinated by the ornament found all throughout the building, and we really drew from there.
One of the most attractive things for us with this program was the involvement of the guild, where we could have previously incarcerated people from the community work on something here and hopefully better their lives, make something their own, have some pride that they can walk by and point to that and say, hey, you know, I had something to do with that. We have this big blank white wall outside here at Union Transfer. We've had the idea that, hey, there should be something up here. Ben and some of the artists came in and they took drawings and sketches of a lot of the stuff like the chandeliers behind us or a lot of the intricate, detailed workings of the inside.
We just trusted through a collaborative process the imagery would come. So yeah, these are the images from the inside of Union Transfer that we took that first day. And here's our pile of drawings.
Yeah, this is the design I came up with because Ben explained to me that with my art I should find a voice. So this is something that black people don't celebrate, like, you know, pride and things like that no more. It's like a separation, so I just came up with that.
They get a little messed up over time because, you know, we get them in the computer and then they're there.
So just working kind of intuitively, this piece developed into this kind of ornamental design, but in a way it references like a face, and it kind of has this thing blocking the mouth. And it really turned into this whole idea about, you know, having a voice and kind of losing a voice or being confined and not having the voice.
This is read as a whole image. It's like a chorus of all of our drawings coming together, but the individual notes are still, it's like the chorus in the background. Their faces are there, their images are there. The ornament really inspired us to think about gramophone horns and how, you know, sound comes from this small place and grows larger. And we saw that as a real visualization of what happens to many of the young men and women in the guild that are coming from, you know, coming from incarceration and entering into the world. Some of the guild members come from an art background.
The piece took me 3 years to make while I was in federal prison. It really consists of the images out of the New York Times that I would collect and then transfer onto the federal prison bed sheets. The whole process itself was really a way for me to kind of transcend my condition. So all of the images that I selected and transferred onto the sheets using hair gel and a plastic spoon basically represent a whole kind of history and timeline of everything that happened in the world while I was removed from it.
Others are ready for art school. You have Craig, he's like, we call him art school. It's like they joke because he's so ready.
So it's 180 sheets. It's a number and alphabet system that we use and a grid system. We lay it out first here, take a look at it before we put it on the wall. Prime the wall first, then Nova Gel the parachute cloth to the wall. That's basically how we do it.
And then you have young men that are really, art is not their background, but they're here and they're ready to work and they're ready to contribute and they're ready to learn.
Like Mural Arts helped me out in where I'm at right now. It transformed my life a lot better to compare from where I was doing like probably 6 months ago. Because right now what I'm doing is helping out the community, doing something positive now.
The type of person I am, I was always by myself. Like I really didn't like being around a lot of people. But now that I'm at Mural Arts, we meeting a lot of people, painting, laughing with the fellas and staying out of trouble, like just having fun.
On a process level, the Restorative Justice Guild provides this very positive experience for these guys re-entering the workforce and for many guys who want to, you know, be artists and explore what that means and what that looks like.
My name is Michael Whittington. I was the first guild member ever, before there was a guild. But well, 9 years later, I'm a guild coordinator. I try to be a mentor. I try to be, you know, like a big brother type for those guys, because when I look at them, I pretty much see me back in the day.
Every day we show up from 9 to 5. You come in, sign the timesheet, get the painting. It's like therapeutic. My favorite thing about painting, because you can get lost in the painting. No matter what's going on with you, once you begin painting, it kind of takes your mind off that.
it shows the process of how we do murals and how we work with the guild. I just threw these pictures in last night because I started thinking about the tagging that the kids were doing, and I started thinking about how they all have these tattoos that they tag themselves now. So this kid, Sam, who's speaking at a mural dedication, you can just see the amount of tattooing that's going on their bodies, and I just think that it's good and bad because it's hard for him to find a job unless he wears a turtleneck and things. And so we always try, I have a full-time person that helps people find jobs when they get done with the program. So it's kind of difficult sometimes when they're all tattooed up, but it's kind of interesting too. And this is another kid, Khalif, he's in the program now. We did a whole project at Martin Luther King Rec Center. He's got a tattoo on his face. I mean, he's a really good kid, and here's the last one. This is a P. This is for Philly. And a lot of them have that tattooed on their arms. But I just like the juxtaposition of him painting with the tattoo of Philadelphia. So that kind of is what we do, and I guess we can open it up.
Hi, so my name's Cameron McCall, and I'm just going to chair the questions and answers that we have at the end here now. So why don't you
sit down? Yeah.
Robyn. Look, just before I open it up, some people here might not know a lot about restorative justice. I mean, there's a massive diversity of stuff you've got there, and the quality is, and we talked a lot about quality over the last couple of days and how quality is subjective and things should be judged on the types of aesthetic qualities that there are other parts of the process and the way that we value things. But it strikes me that when artists, writers are talking about murals, they're often talking about them as being of lesser quality, and the quality of the work that's being done there is really high. So I suppose the first couple of questions from me would be, is there something about the quality that allows you to then get out there and negotiate those spaces, in the urban environment with the types of building owners and communities that you're working with? And are there any sort of principles of restorative justice that you might be able to give us a little bit of insight in that might help people sort of tap into what you're doing in terms of that sort of idea of restorative justice? Okay, well, I'll answer the last question first because that's an easier question. The restorative justice is actually a concept where you involve the victim, the offender, some people have a problem with that word, but someone who's broken the law, and the community in a process of healing. So the way we interpret that at Mural Arts is that I work with a lot of victims groups of crime and neighborhoods that are crime-ridden, and we do a lot of mural projects in those neighborhoods, including the rec centers and walls, to give back to the community. So it's repairing the harm caused to the community by doing something positive, and also teaching skills to people that have been incarcerated or on probation, positive skills like the jobs program. The hardest thing for most of the guys, and there are some women in the program, is getting to work on time. There's always an emergency. So it's those soft skills that we teach. It's not just about the art, it's about showing up. We don't have a lot of behavioral problems, but mostly showing up. So we're really constantly on that. We have jobs class, workshops. So teaching them competencies, whether it's ceramics, art, building scaffolding, they build scaffolding, and then involving the community. So it's that kind of three-pronged approach. It's actually written into the juvenile law in Pennsylvania. It's called Balance and Restorative Justice. As far as the process of art and the walls and the community, it's one of the most difficult parts of my job because you have an artist, you have a community with certain ideas, and a lot of people are not art people, so they want to see a landscape, or they want the history of their area, or they want their son in the mural, or themselves in the mural, very limited ideas of art. So it's hard for the artist because it's a public work. So the artists that tend to it are open to that process of getting feedback. I mean, I've had projects where we all thought it was a beautiful design, we take it back to the community, and they hated it. And it's hard for the artist to hear that. So that doesn't happen very often. So it's a real tricky process. And the murals are not cheap. So when you spend that kind of money, you want it to be visible.
you want people to like it. We have a lot of older murals that are not so good, and we have a rigorous design review process now, internally and externally. So we're constantly trying to upgrade the art.
Okay, well, I suppose that's another thing that, you know, you were saying in that last video was a fundraiser. I mean, where's the funding come from? Because that's another part of this question of quality is making sure that, you know, the paint's not fading, and you're talking about new design works and restoration, and these are expensive things.
Yes, very expensive. And particularly with arts in prison, because there's a lot of people, believe it or not, that think that people in prison don't deserve an art program. So that's another hard sell for us. But I think with the amount of people incarcerated, people are starting to say, hey, we've got to try something different here. And it's definitely different, and it works. Most of our people do not get in trouble again. We have a recidivism rate of about 20% that get arrested again, as opposed to 60% of people that aren't in a program like this. So we can show that it's successful. And I have about 50 or 60 people in the program every year. They get employed for 4 to 6 months. They get paid, and it's a step for them. The funding comes from, well, my project is funded by about 10 different sources. Foundations, Ford Foundation, local foundations. We get city money. The county jail gives me a grant every year of about $200,000 to work with inmates in the county jail. So it's a kind of a hybrid of some private donors. But we're always trying to raise money. It's easier for art ed to raise money than restorative justice because it's kids and art. But we get, you know, we've been lucky so far.
Yeah, so maybe we'll open it up. Are there any questions?
Thanks for your presentation. Robyn, sorry for
Can you use the mic, please, so that it gets recorded? It doesn't work.
It's not working.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
I was wondering, because I liked your presentations, and without any doubt it helped the people which participate in your project, but for me it has little to do with what we were talking about today now, because for me it's a completely top to bottom approach, yeah? And I was wondering if you could explain an example how you avoid to be top to bottom, because for example, how do the children participate in painting? Because obviously they didn't paint, they were talking about painting or something. And the second thing is how can homeless people participate in painting such a mural?
That's a good question. I thought about that a lot last night because it is different than what we've been talking about the last 2 days. But it's also sort of how you can use art, and it started as an anti-graffiti program to kind of change social policy. The murals are painted on that cloth, and you saw in the video how they were painting the pieces that go up on the wall. So that enables a lot of, I think the guys in prison have painted over 30 murals. And the murals that we do, like the one about incarceration and families, that's totally informed by the guys in jail and their families. So it's a process of listening. The artist listens to people and their stories and then comes up with the design. But it's also informed by the people in the neighborhood or the people involved in the mural process. And the other thing I was thinking when you were talking is we have art shows, and we show individual pieces that the people in the program have done and sell them for them. So it allows them individual expression. So it's not just about a big mural, but it's also an opportunity to express yourselves. And a lot of pieces get sold. So we kind of work that way too. Russell, the guy, AKA Art School, I didn't know that was his AKA. I met him in prison, and he is a self-taught artist. And this has enabled him to really move his own personal work forward. So it's kind of both ways, but it's definitely a collaboration. It's an interesting process.
Maybe only one short question. Does the graffiti scene respect what you do? Like,
Oh yeah, that's a good, I forgot to mention that, yes. That's why we started initially, is that the graffiti writers were part of the process, so they didn't tag the murals. Our murals very rarely get tagged. They do sometimes, and we have a 24-hour turnaround where we'll paint out the graffiti. Yeah.
They are just afraid of getting painted over really quick.
So that's how it works.
It has nothing to do with respect.
Well, let's look at it another way. I mean, I noticed that a lot of the processes use artists at the centre of it,
Yeah.
and they're recruiting other, different stakeholders and people, and
Yeah.
Community and inmates and kids around that artist, and they're getting recognised in all of those images, and from that derives a particular those artistic qualities. But a lot of those people are coming in from the outside. You're talking about Shepherd Ferry coming in, you're talking about people coming in, you're talking about people who have gone away and come back, and they're represented there. Is there an engagement with local artists
Yeah.
at the centre of that, and how does that, I mean, we've talked a lot about the fact that graffiti and street art has this tension and ambiguity between it, and it sits at, and there's contestations around how it's perceived and how it's represented. But the street art and street artists and how that is engaging with other arts media is I think encapsulated in the work that you're doing there,
Yeah.
where there's a range of different things that are happening that include also Shepherd Ferry, and it's going over. So do we also see that then going to local artists and people who are coming out of the graffiti scene and things like that and leading those
More and more. It's funny you mentioned Shepherd Ferry, because that mural that he did got tagged that night because we left the scaffold up. I know there's tension there. I mean, I don't know that much about this graffiti, street art, mural tension, and I don't know why it exists, because we have tons of free walls where people can graffiti. And I don't think there needs to be tension around it. But we do employ a lot of local artists, and a lot of people in the community, believe it or not, don't like graffiti, and that live in the community, so they are a part of the mural process, and they kind of look out for the murals. And I think in Philadelphia anyway, the graffiti artists respect mural arts, because it started employing graffiti artists, and we work with them. So we do have a good collaboration with them. Not to say that they never get tagged, because they do. So.
I was just wondering about the subjectivities that you use, and how art is influencing on, you have this, like on the one hand you have the inmates, these criminals, problematic subjects, and then on the other hand you have the artists, and then you have the people that live there, and I don't feel quite good about that, and I don't like the idea about art, like you have the problematic subject, and then you pull in art, and it might become an artist, and then everything is okay. I don't like the whole idea about it. And me, in my own experience, I lived that, like painting. And at the one hand, I can go out in the night and paint, and I'm a criminal. And on the other hand, I can go in the day, I can write a project, and I'm the artist. I don't like the idea about being the artist, being an expert on how to design public space. I would like to have another approach about maybe the people being the artists, or the together of different people creating artistic dynamics, not about one expert.
Yeah, I think I sort of talked about how we involve the community and what they want to see. So it's not only the artists doing the designs, it's always informed by the community.
Like the simplistic views they want to see the kids in.
Yeah. It's difficult work, there's no question about it. It's difficult work when you have that many factors involved. And then the subject matter, you throw in the subject matter, some of my projects. I'm doing one right now on mass incarceration. Nobody wants that in their neighborhood. So, no, believe me, I've tried every neighborhood. So what we ended up doing is we're doing a series of panels, 3x5 panels. And we did a whole campaign on the subways, or the tube. Train and posters, we work with the poster artists, and we're like advertisements, but they're all about why there's so many people in jail in the United States, and they kind of subtle. So we tried different means. It's not always hitting you over the head with a mural.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I can see some of the criticisms around, when there's the roller going past, and you can get the criticism that it's mural is buff, but there's a lot of difference in many of the instances you were showing, rather than just some patchy grey stuff on the wall that has covered something creative. And I'd like to hear more about the process, about how sometimes it seems, for example, with that park, how the art activity is the first, and with the behavioural health stuff, how the art activity seemed to be part of a process of involvement of lots of other things. So it's like the process of sort of weaving a social fabric. Where does the art meet the placemaking, meet the other activities around healthcare and other stuff, and how do you put that together?
Yeah, I have a fact sheet about the Porch Light Initiative, but basically that was through a series of workshops at different sites with substance abuse clinics. We had a site at a medical center, a community medical center, where people could drop in and do the artwork and kind of, we don't do art therapy per se because we're not licensed art therapists, but sort of using the art as a means to communicate. It's really not my area, but if you're interested, I have a fact sheet on that program. And I also have the curriculum we did for schools around the Roots project and some other things. We developed curriculum around the projects where we give to teachers that they can use in the classroom.
Thanks. So in that respect, the art is sort of bringing together a group of different people. So rather than just sitting in the room looking at each other and saying, okay, let's talk about these issues, you're doing something together, and the conversations you're having around the thing you're doing actually contribute to a bigger sort of exchange of understandings around the challenges that you're facing. So it's difficult to talk about those sorts of issues when you're playing football together. But I guess it's easier to talk about those
when
issues
you're just
when
painting.
you're in the concept of your painting and spending time and considering and iterating together.
That's how I fell in love with it, because I was running a program for juveniles and we did the art project at the prison, painting with the inmates and the kids. They were just talking about everything. And more information than I ever heard them talk about, because you're looking down, you're just talking away and not really. So yeah, it's that process of interacting with people doing a project together, and then in the end you have this beautiful mural and everybody is like so proud of it. So it's hard to discuss.
So you're not licensed art therapists, but you're
No.
doing art therapy.
Yeah.
Well, you're not doing art therapy actually. That's not it.
You're using
because
the
art therapy would be something that you do to somebody else. And what this explicitly doesn't sound to me like is that. It sounds to me like a group of people coming together and having the opportunity to do things together and with each other. So that's not art therapy in terms of like delivering it to somebody else. That's a group of people coming together around something they enjoy doing, they've got time to spend to do, and seeing it where it takes them. I think it's different.
Okay, I'm going to try and answer the question, I think, but it's going to be a bit meandering, so bear with me. So, I think that when we've been listening in the last few days, we were talking about the act of graffiti and then the images, and including tagging, and that a program which is removing tagging, will always be controversial to the artists who want to, or the writers who want to tag. So I'm not addressing that, but I am interested in the modes of collaboration in the point that just raised by Adam. Like, I'm on the National Alliance for Arts and Criminal Justice, so I work with prison. What happens, we have Kessler Awards, and so the prisoners create bits of art, which is saying it's very healing, goes into various spaces and is always considered to be outsider art. I haven't seen on this scale in the UK the collaborative projects like this, and that's why I wanted to hear you, because I think it's amazing. I've not seen this scale of insiders being included. Some of the work I've seen is with theatre, where what Adam was talking about is absolutely right. So the argument is in theatre, by taking theatre into prison, and you will get the Daily Mail say you've given them the gym, you've given them telly, and now you're giving them theatre, what sort of people are you? But the argument is it costs 40 grand a year to keep one man in prison. What you've just said, you've reduced that by 40%. That's 40% of all those fees that could be spent on something more useful. So well done.
Yeah.
But in terms of the UK, what happens is that with the collaborative process, sort of change happens. Again, so people can work in groups, they learn to communicate, all the things that you've described. But I don't see that we have the engagement with our authorities, and I think that the Philadelphia project has a particular history. You had a black mayor who had enough of black people being put in prison, and he wanted to do something. So this project, as I understand it, and I might be wrong, I might be making it up, but it seemed to come out of a political moment, and we don't have that here. Like what we have in the Kersler Foundation, and it really irritates me, because they always go about the intrinsic value of art. So it's always, prison art is always outsider art, so the argument is it brings the public into the gallery to talk about issues, but it's always seen as inferior, which sends me mad. You know, sorry, it's one of the things that makes me really angry, because, you know, it's about what the Academy, I think, has done to creativity, but that's a different debate. I think the issue is what collaborations can this bring up? And I suppose, you know, like, you know, we're sort of talking about graffiti in a positive way, about it taking back the city, but it's also selfish. It's just like a lot of artists are selfish. This is my view. This is one person's view that will be imposed on the world. And I suppose that the collaborative nature of it makes it, I suppose, a way of articulating different points of view. And I understand your criticism, where you're saying, well, they're just building it. But I suppose Lee Hopkins gets that criticism, that he just drops in artists from other places to, like, do Brick Lane. And so I think you can't win. I do think there is a collaborative process. And I wonder if you could say what you think the scale of that collaboration is.
It's huge. We're very fortunate. You know, even the current mayor, every mayor since Mayor Good has supported our program. I know the superintendent of the Department of Corrections in Pennsylvania is a big fan of ours. This prison commissioner, police commissioner, we've done a number of murals on police stations. We saw that throughout working with, we had a program called Kids and Cops, which we could probably use a lot more of now in the United States. It's yeah, that's a whole nother story we won't get into right now. But so we're always trying to get in there and solve problems or help facilitate problem solving as opposed to individual artists. So it's kind of different than the last couple of days in the sense that it's broader in scale, I would say. And most of our artists are local artists. We do bring in people from other countries because we like to do that. But a lot of our artists are local artists, so.
I'm wary of time. We did start a bit late, so I've got 3 more questions and we might finish it up there. So Ben.
I'll try and be quick. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. And I was thinking back to the talk yesterday from Chantal Moody, where she was talking about the possibility of graffiti and street art being agonistic, but she was very clear that for her that didn't mean it was should be a moral project. And I think what comes across in the way you talk about this is that it's very much a moral project. You use this language of healing, and I thought that was really interesting. And also we were talking yesterday about the distinction between a mural as a painting on a wall and the mural movement, which is about a revolutionary collective project. Perhaps not always, but historically a lot of the time has involved these very carefully worked out, ethically arranged relationships between people. So that's just an observation. I think with you, with your this work, it comes across, you talked about that sense of a larger movement, and all of the work is about giving voice, no matter how difficult that might be in certain situations, to subaltern people, and perhaps also it comes across very strongly that there's this civic, what Rebecca Ross here calls the civic imaginary, actually, the city of Philadelphia is very present, and that took me back to the first day's conversation around the transport network here, and how the management of graffiti is so kind of contractually fragmented because of the privatization of this municipal system. I was just wondering whether you could say a bit more about how the mayor, when he set this up, what might have been the influences. Was there already an informal mural art movement in Philadelphia? Because I know that Chicago was the Chicago Wall of Respect in 1967, and this was part of the civil rights movement, and it was African American people representing their own history, and it was a very powerful revolutionary act, and it became then a site for action and protest and poetry. And I was wondering whether there is a prehistory of the mural movement in Philadelphia, and whether these murals also become sites for action and events and so on after they've been.
I'm not aware of a history prior to mural arts of muralism in Philadelphia, other than the Depression era murals that were done in buildings, the WPA murals, which were not different. It was the hiring of artists during the Depression. but not particularly in Philadelphia, but I'm sure that Jane's ideas were formulated by other cities' mural projects. And she just kind of got the idea, and of course muralism goes back centuries, but took it and put it to use with the anti-graffiti network. So it was kind of, yeah, it wasn't a history of that kind of muralism in Philadelphia per se. But the mayor good was just tired of the tagging and the graffiti everywhere, and that they also were locking up spray paint. You couldn't buy spray paint. You had to go, you had to be like an older person to buy spray paint. I mean, there was a whole campaign against graffiti writing at that time. It was a huge problem. It's become a problem again in Philadelphia, or some people wouldn't say it was a problem, but.
Okay, thanks everyone. So first, I just want to clarify that I really like a lot of the mural projects that we've heard about, and they're really, seem like great initiatives, and the community art projects are great. So this is not a comment against them, but well, first off, I want to say that it might be interesting for you to look into some, I don't know if it's framed as restorative justice, but certainly graffiti art projects in jails in São Paulo and Brazil. You could look at work by Derek Pardue, for example. He looks at hip-hop, the use of hip-hop as creative expression there, and they include graffiti workshops as ways to be creative. It's not necessarily brought back into the streets, probably for funding, but it is not that graffiti is unable to be used as restorative justice. In fact, it's incredibly empowering to individuals and as a collective unit, right? So I really wish that the coordinators of this conference had not called it graffiti sessions, but called it urban art sessions, because right now there's a really uncomfortable undertone that's being created in which graffiti is being replicated as being positioned as a crime, and that murals are being positioned as restorative to the community, right? Like, it's explicitly in your project, and that's no bad on you, but like, it's really uncomfortable as an undertone. And it's almost like murals and collaborative art processes are being framed as a better urban intervention, and that's really not a great way to be positioning things. And I really feel like it would be better if we could be framing these debates as appreciating the diversity of contributions to creative urban space and creative urban public communities, rather than framing one against the other or one is better, because they're all contributing things, okay? And, so, yeah, I think with that, this framework, just one more comment on that, this idea of like collaboration is better. If we look back to Alice's video yesterday, graffiti, although it's an individual act, actually creates a lot of interaction in urban space and creates dialogues. It creates encounters. When people are painting along a wall, they're communicating with each other, they're creating alternative sociabilities in urban space, and they're also creating dialogues amongst the public who are commenting on it and who are engaging with urban space and approaching urban space in a different way and reflecting on their position in society differently. So let's give a little bit more credit to graffiti.
No, I'm not saying one's better than the other. This is just the process we use.
That's why I'm saying, like, it's totally not against you. Like, I love your project.
I think we can take that as a comment.
So can I just respond to that? As, I think that the fair comment in what you're saying, but if we'd have focused on all the urban art, we'd have had to include so much more staff that we wouldn't have had the focus that we've had, which is a specialist focus.
Well, right now you haven't focused on graffiti. That's
we've had quite a lot of papers that have been really interesting, that have actually embraced different types
but
of
Farama, use your terminology correctly, is what I'm saying.
We're doing our best, but what I would say to you...
This project, sorry Ryan, I'll just add something in. So today is about looking at opportunities for action. We've tried to ensure that this is an open discourse over the last few days, the Mural Arts Project is one response that did start out of graffiti, as you've heard clearly.
Out of anti-graffiti.
Yeah,
Like,
it
it
started out of anti-graffiti.
Against graffiti.
Yes,
Like if you're one
it
of...
is. So be open and say,
I am open. I've been working with
let's
there
have
for a long
let's have a
time,
conversation about if you've got a better idea. Let's hear it today because that's what today's about.
This isn't
Read
an
my
idea
research.
for graffiti
I don't know.
at all. I mean, totally against it. What I wanted to say is that I think, again, I agree with Sandra. What you're doing is really great. It's really important. But I think there's also a power that you have to make people see things they might not want to see. It's not only about allowing people to see what they feel comfortable with. That agreement and that consensuality is dangerous because we need to force people to encounter things which they otherwise won't encounter. And especially in the US right now, I mean, I was going crazy last night reading the news, obviously about things you probably all know what I'm talking about. And there are so many important issues which you are dealing with, but there are so many which are too controversial for you maybe to deal with, which is what needs to be dealt with. Now, maybe it's not you that should be doing that, but I think...
Well, I don't sugarcoat anything, and I don't want to give the idea that my background is in criminal justice, not art, and I've been in this field a long time, and I am trying to get across, we're incarcerating too many people, there's a lot of problems with the system, and we're using art, so it's not really, in a sense, graffiti.
Yeah,
so I see your
absolutely.
point, because it's called graffiti sessions, but it also talks about using art as a way to get, what was the word you used, confront people or make them, hit them over the head with it, or...
But I think because the murals have to be acceptable, I think that's where the problem is, because then you're looking to create consensus rather than agonism.
Well, that's
it's exactly about consensus and not agonistic spaces.
Well, there's room for other people to come in and do murals and be
I think we'll start to wind up. I've got one last question. We might have to leave it at that.
Just perhaps to contextualise some of this or bring it all together, I want to clarify something that you said that relates to criminal justice issue that we have here. And I think maybe it was just an error, a slip of the tongue. But you said that there are around about 13% of the US population is African American. I think you said that 40% of that 13% is in jail, whereas I think you meant 40%
of the people in jail
right,
are,
Okay, in the UK, 2% of the population is either African or Afro-Caribbean. Around about 40% of the prison population in the UK is black. So
That's
to
even worse.
contextualise what you're saying here, I would argue, given what you're doing, is I get the merits and the demerits of this process, but we have a problem here that we do not recognise in the way that you recognise it in the US. Okay, so because 40% of a 2% group is very different than 40% out of 13%
wow, I didn't know that.
of the
That's
population.
amazing.
And here we are in enlightened, multiracial, anti-racist Britain.
I think this has been a great start for today. I think, as Marcus is pointing out, we're coming from different positions here, but we're looking for permeability between those positions in order to understand these issues. And so I think, in terms of calls to action, we can all bring something to the table. But I think it's important that Robyn's been here for 3 days listening to these things. And so, whilst Robyn hasn't necessarily come from these areas in her own work, she's seeing the other perspectives. And so, if you could all join me in thanking Robyn for...
Thank you.